Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Okay, close your eyes for a sec. Picture this. You're way up north, Arctic Norway, early June. It's midnight, but the sun's still up, low and gold over the water. There's this keen breeze.
Right.
Maybe some reindeer chewing nearby. You might spot a huge sea eagle or hear that weird drumming sound of common snipes.
Yeah, that atmospheric thrumming.
Exactly. But then, in a marsh, you see them, about 15 birds, ruffs. And what hits you is, wow, they're all different colors, like completely different.
Every single one unique.
Yeah. And they're moving together like friends, but they're all males. Peak breeding season.
And that's the first clue, isn't it? Because ruffs are a lekking species. So these birds are rivals, fierce rivals actually, but also, well, comrades on this shared display ground.
Okay, lekking, right? Rivals display.
But the real puzzle, the thing we're diving into today, is that incredible individuality in their feathers. No two males have the same outfit. It's not just, a few color options.
Not like different breeds of dog or something. Exactly. This is wild variation in a wild species. Every single male. And honestly, it breaks a basic rule of biology. It's a paradox we need to untangle.
Right. It's not like, pigeons in the park where humans have bred all sorts of colors.
Yeah.
This is nature doing something completely off script.
Totally off script. So our mission today, figure out how this baffling exception works. How can this level of individual flamboyance persist?
Okay, let's start with the wardrobe itself. Just how varied are we talking?
Well, the main things are the neck ruff, these big, showy feathers around the neck, and the head tufts they can stick up.
And the variety.
Oh, it's insane. The ruffs, they can be brown, orange, red, tawny, black, dark blue, buff, bright white, cream, gray, you name it.
Wow.
And not just solid colors. They can be multicolored, flecked, striped, pattern, and the head tufts match or contrast. It's like...
Oh, well.
Oh, someone described it as variable as a clothing catalog.
Or like wedding guests trying not to wear the same dress.
Exactly that kind of feeling. And then there are the facial wattles, too. Little pimply growths around the eyes and beak that pop up in spring. Yellow, red, orange.
So even their faces change color.
Yep. And their back feathers vary, too. It's not new either. Back in the 1700s, a naturalist named Klein apparently looked at over 100 ruffs and only found 2 that were similar.
100. And only 2 the same. It really drives it home.
It does. It's profound individuality.
Okay, so they're incredibly diverse, but only sometimes.
Right. That's another twist. This whole spectacular show basically disappears in winter when they're down in Africa. They shed the ruffs, the tufts, and look much more like the females, the reeves.
So they have this sort of drab, everyday look.
Yep. But then, comes spring, on their way north again, boom, the colors erupt. Each one gets its unique breeding finery back. It's like a secret identity for mating season.
That's fascinating. But what's weird is, apart from this crazy plumage and the lekking, they're pretty normal birds, right?
Surprisingly normal, yeah. They're just a medium-sized sandpiper. Average beak, average legs. They migrate far, but not the furthest. They hang out in muddy places. Pretty standard stuff for a wader.
Which makes the contrast even starker.
Exactly. This extreme and aberrant burst of sexual selection, as one paper called it, sitting on top of an otherwise average bird. That's what makes it so deeply perplexing. Why this bird?
And it really throws a wrench into the standard ideas about sexual selection, doesn't it? Like with black grouse, you mentioned lekking.
Right. In most lekking species, like black grouse, the females pick the best-looking male, the flashiest one, and over time, that drives this extravagant plumage.
Makes sense. Survival of the sexiest.
So it makes all the males look the same, because all the females agree on what's sexy. So you get homogenization. A black grouse in Siberia looks just like one in Scotland. It's a uniform.
Okay, so female choice usually equals sameness in the males.
Generally, yeah. But ruffs, they blow that wide open. That's the paradox. Female ruffs are definitely choosing. Studies show one male often gets most of the matings. They're just as picky.
So the selection pressure is there.
Absolutely. But the outcome, total opposite. The males do not look alike, not even the ones standing right next to each other on the same leak.
How is that possible?
That's the million-dollar question. It directly contradicts what we expect. Even early observers, like Edmund Selous back in 1906, saw females making clear choices, often for the same male. The choice part is clear, but the result, completely baffling.
So if the females are choosy, but the males are all different, what actually happens on these leaks? Are they similar to black grouse lekes in other ways?
Well, yes and no. On the surface, there are similarities. You get maybe 10, 15 birds. Each male has his little patch, his court.
Okay.
You get younger males, the marginals, trying to sneak in, usually getting roughed up.
Typical youngsters.
And there's plenty of fighting, sometimes quite vicious, between the territory holders. And when a female Areve shows up, they all do their displays. Puff the ruff, raise the tufts, bow, stand tall, flutter their wings.
The whole song and dance.
Right. And the Reeves visit several times, often picking the same main guy in the center. So far, so standard lick.
But there must be differences.
Huge differences. Two really crucial ones. First, rough flecks are silent. Eerily silent.
No singing, no calls.
Nothing. Just wing noises fluttering or the thud of a fight. Totally unlike most lecks.
Yeah.
David Lank, who studied them for decades, suggested maybe the extreme visual difference compensates for the lack of sound cues for telling each other apart.
Interesting idea. And the second difference?
This one's a game changer. Female ruffs don't just mate once. They mate multiple times, often with at least two different males.
Really? Not just the top guy?
Nope. They might visit different leks or mate with different males on the same lake. It's like they're deliberately hedging their bets, spreading the genetic risk, maybe.
Spreading their bets? Wow, okay. That changes things. But wait, there's more complexity, right? These satellite males.
Ah, yes, the satellites. Discovered back in the 60s in the Netherlands, these guys have really pale or bright white ruffs and tufts, and they behave totally differently.
How so?
Well, the darker ruffed males, they're called independents. They hold the territories. But the satellites, they don't hold territory, they just wander around the lake.
And the independents let them. I thought they fought rivals.
Mostly, yes.
Yeah.
The independents seem to tolerate them, sometimes even encourage them onto their courts. It seems having a satellite nearby might actually help attract females.
Like having a wingman.
Kind of. You even see them doing coordinated displays together, the dark independent and the white satellite bowing in sync when a reeve is watching. Apparently that duo act is quite appealing to the females.
So it's a complicated alliance. Does the satellite get to mate?
It's tricky. The really dominant independents usually stop them, but the slightly lower-ranking independents often let them stay, maybe accepting the small risk the satellite might sneak a mating, because the satellite's presence increases their own chances of seducing the female. It's the source called it a mighty complicated game.
It really sounds it. Which leads us to the genetics. How do these different types, independent satellite, even come about?
Right. This takes us to the incredible work of David Lank, Dov Lank. Starting back in 1983, he did something pretty radical. He caught ruffs in Finland and managed to fly 40 of their eggs in incubators on a passenger plane all the way to Canada.
No way. On a plane?
Yep. 32 hatched, and he basically became a ruff farmer, setting up the only ruff colony in North America. He ran it for 35 years, sometimes had hundreds of birds.
Wow. So he could control who mated with whom.
Exactly. Controlled paternity. And he quickly figured out that whether a male became an independent or a satellite wasn't about upbringing, it was pure genetics. Nature, not nurture.
And how did the genetics work? Was it complicated?
Surprisingly simple, actually.
Yeah.
Classic Mendelian inheritance. Like Gregor Mendel and his peas. There's basically a genetic switch. Independents tend to pass on the independent version. Satellites, though, they carry both versions, satellite and independent. They're heterozygotes.
Meaning they can have offspring of both types.
Correct. But here's the kicker. If a bird inherits two copies of the satellite version, it's lethal. They just don't develop.
Oh, wow. So you can't have a pure satellite, genetically speaking.
Exactly. All satellite males carry one satellite gene and one independent gene. That double dose is fatal.
Okay, that's a lot already. But wasn't there another type of male discovered?
Ah, yes. Just when you think you've got it figured out, enter Joop Jakima, a potato farmer in Friesland, Netherlands.
A potato farmer?
Yep. But also one of these highly skilled guys who knew how to net shorebirds, a practice called Wilster fighting that dates back centuries. Anyway, in 2004, Jakima caught a ruff that looked female. No ruff, no tufts, but seemed bigger, almost male-sized. He thought it might be a male disguised as a female. Scientists were skeptical at first, apparently.
I bet.
But DNA tests proved him right. It was a male in permanent female plumage. They called them faders. They're rare, maybe 1% of male.
Faders, okay. And how do they fit in?
Well, get this. Despite being slightly smaller-bodied, faders have even bigger tests than the other males.
Bigger tests? Why?
We'll get to that. Their strategy is super sneaky. They wander the leak looking harmless. Sometimes independents even try to mate with them, mistaking them for females.
Seriously?
Yep, homosexual copulation. But then the fader waits until a female is soliciting a mating from a displaying independent, and they dart in and steal a quick mating. Just pounce.
Wow. That's bold. So they're genetically different too.
Absolutely. Genetically distinct, strategy fixed from birth. So now we have 3 types: independent, satellite, and fader.
Okay, 3 distinct types. So the race was on to find the actual gene or genes.
Exactly. Lank teamed up with Terry Burke and Clemens Cooper, and there was another group at Uppsala University also working on it. A friendly race, apparently.
And did they find it?
They both did, simultaneously. They mapped the Ruff genome and zeroed in on the same spot, a specific bit of chromosome 11.
Uh-huh. So one gene controls all 3.
Well, that was the surprise. It wasn't just one gene. It was a massive chunk of DNA, a super gene, about 4.5 million base pairs long, containing over 120 genes.
A super gene. Okay, that sounds complex.
It is. And here's how it works. In faders, this whole massive section is inverted, flipped backwards. That happened maybe 3.9 million years ago.
Flipped, like mirror image.
Essentially, yeah, the sequence reads backwards. Then, much more recently, maybe 70,000 years ago, a complex genetic event, a double crossover happened between a normal chromosome and a fader chromosome. That created the satellites. They're hybrids, with bits reading forwards and bits reading backwards.
Whoa. Okay, that explains the 3 types. But what about the lethality? Why can't you get 2 copies of the satellite or fader versions?
Because both mutations, the fader inversion and the satellite crossover version, mess up a really critical gene within that supergene. It's called CENPEN, and it's vital for cell division.
Oh.
So if an embryo gets 2 broken copies of CENPEN from any combination of satellite or fader genes, it just can't develop properly. That's why those combinations are lethal.
Okay, that makes genetic sense, but it still feels like a paradox biologically. Why keep these mutations around if they cause lethal combinations and potentially other problems?
That's exactly the puzzle. Cooper's work shows these inverted supergenes are actually accumulating more mutations bits, getting deleted, inserted, duplicated, signs of gradual erosion.
Sounds bad.
It might be, especially for females carrying them. But here's a twist. This degeneration might actually help the satellite and fader males. By potentially lowering their aggression or modifying their courtship behavior in ways that make their sneaky strategies work better. It's a concept called sexual antagonism, where a gene is good for one sex but bad for the other.
Right, benefiting the males at the female's expense. And is there a mechanism for that lower aggression?
Yes. There's a gene within the supergene, HSD17B2, involved in hormone processing. The mutations make this gene more active in satellites and faders.
More active?
Yeah, causing them to convert more of their testosterone into a much milder hormone. So they literally have lower levels of the aggression-driving testosterone circulating. That's likely why they adopt those less confrontational, non-territorial strategies. It's all tied to their hormones, which are tied to that supergene.
Okay, so we have these 3 genetically distinct strategies: independent, satellite, fader. Why hasn't one just won out? Usually the best strategy takes over, right?
You'd think so. We see things like frequency-dependent selection in other animals, think rock, paper, scissors, where each strategy does well only when the others are common. Side-blotched lizards are a classic example.
Right, keeping all 3 in the mix.
Right. But that model doesn't quite explain the Ruffs, mainly because of that lethality problem. The satellite and fader genes are constantly being removed from the gene pool when they end up in those double doses.
So they need some extra advantage just to break even.
Exactly. To persist, birds carrying just 1 copy of the satellite or fader mutation must, on average, produce about 5% more surviving offspring than the standard independent males.
5%. That's quite specific. Where does that advantage come from? Do females prefer them?
That's the obvious thought, right? The sexy son idea, females choose males whose genes make attractive sons. But the data just doesn't strongly support it for Ruffs. Females don't seem to go out of their way to mate with satellites or faders.
So it's not attraction. Does it help them survive better, migrate better?
Doesn't seem like it. In fact, there's evidence the mutations might be bad for females who carry them. Females with the fader mutation tend to be smaller, lay smaller eggs, have fewer chicks survive. And remember, if any female carrying an inversion mates with a male carrying one, 1/4 of their eggs won't hatch because of that lethal double dose.
Yet females don't avoid them.
Apparently not, based on studies like Lank's. He specifically looked for female aversion and didn't find it. He said the phenotypic gambit fails, meaning you can't just look at the obvious traits and predict the choice. Something else must be going on.
So if it's not obvious female preference, not survival, what else is left? How did they get that 5% edge?
Well, remember Jukama noticing the fader was large and then finding they had bigger testes.
Ah, the testes. Right. You said we'd come back to that.
Exactly. Naturalists noticed way back in the 1700s that ruffs have unusually large tests for their body size compared to other waders. Tim Burke had confirmed this in the 90s.
And large testes usually mean?
Usually means the females are mating with multiple males. Think chimps versus gorillas. Chimps have huge tests because females mate widely, leading to sperm competition inside the female. Gorillas have tiny testes because one male dominates mating.
So rough tests point to sperm competition.
Strongly. And get this, rough sperm also have the longest tails of any sandpiper sperm studied.
Longer tails, like for faster swimming.
Precisely. It all points to a fierce race after mating has happened, inside the female's reproductive tract.
Okay, so how does this help satellites and faders persist?
Well, we know female ruffs mate with multiple males and store the sperm for days. The hypothesis is that satellites and faders, perhaps because of those larger tests, produce more sperm per ejaculation.
Ah, quantity over quality, or maybe quantity gives an edge in the race.
Exactly. More sperm, or maybe better competing sperm, means they have a better statistical chance of fertilizing the eggs, even if they don't mate as often or as obviously as the independents. They could win the post-copulatory competition.
So they could father more chicks despite having fewer matings. That would give them the edge they need.
That's the leading idea. It fits the test size, the sperm tails, the female multiple mating. It's a powerful explanation. It connects to ideas like selfish DNA genes that promote their own transmission even if they have some costs for the individual carrying them. Cooper even described these mutations as having hallmarks of parasitic genetic elements.
Wow, parasitic genes. Lenk wasn't fully convinced, though.
Lenk remained a bit more cautious, suggesting, you're right, we've explained the 3 discrete strategies, but not the continuous, mind-boggling individual plumage variation on top of that. What drives that?
Do we have any clues?
Some.
Yeah.
Lenk showed this individuality is heritable, at least partly, and we know a key color gene, MC1R, which affects pigment in lots of birds, sits inside that supergene, and it exists in different forms in each morph.
Oh, so MC1R is involved.
Likely, yes. And other genes in that inverted region affect sex hormones, which can also influence plumage. So the thinking is that MC1R probably interacts with these hormone-related genes, and maybe others, to generate this incredible palette.
But the exact mechanism, how it fine-tunes every single bird's look.
That's still fuzzy. We don't have the complete picture, how all those genetic interactions produce this seemingly infinite unique outfit for almost every male ruff. That part remains one of the ruff's enduring secrets.
So what a journey. We started under the midnight sun in Norway, looking at this bird with impossibly diverse feathers.
Yeah, then dove into its strange silent licks, the paradox of female choice leading to diversity instead of uniformity.
Uncovered satellites and sneaky faders, and then got deep into the genetics, lethal genes, supergenes, inversions.
Right, piecing together how this seemingly average sandpiper became this amazing exception to the rules, challenging core biological theories, and how clues came from everywhere, genetic labs, historical observations, even a sharp-eyed potato farmer.
And those disproportionately large tests turning out to be a key clue.
Absolutely, a clue hidden in plain sight, leading us towards sperm competition as a major driving force.
So as we wrap up, it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How much weirdness, how much genetic compromise can a species actually tolerate if some underlying genetic element benefits?
Yeah, like these potentially selfish genes. What other hidden genetic conflicts might be out there, shaping the animal kingdom in ways we don't even suspect yet, ways that might seem completely counterintuitive for the animal itself?
Definitely gives you something new to think about.